Films are great. For as long as I can remember, I have loved films. Some of my favourite childhood memories revolve around either discovering a new film or discussing films and film theories with my school friends. When I left school, I transferred those film conversations from the schoolyard into the pub. I then discussed and reviewed films on community radio for the best part of a decade, before moving on with Matt, my co-host of the radio show, to create the Movies Made Us Do It podcast, the recording of which is still a highlight for me on a weekly basis. I even tried my hand at making a few films, with results? The point is that when I'm not watching films, I'm talking about films. And video games, but that feels like the subject of another video series. Recently, I've been grieving a loss, and, as a result, I've turned to the comfort blanket that are my favourite films. Which has led me to consider, what are my favourite films? Over the years, I've discussed some of my favourite films on the radio show and on the Movies Made Us Do It, but I'm not sure I've ever sat down and really considered what all of my favourite films are. Well, I've got nothing but time, so I figure I will make a list for each genre and pick some of my favourite films. I'm not claiming these are the best films ever. Anyone who has listened to me over the years will know that I have appalling taste, so I would never claim to know what the best films in the world are. These are just my favourite films by genre, and I think I will start with science fiction. The War of the Worlds from 1953. Being my favourite science fiction novel, this film could have gone one of two ways for me. Fortunately, director Byron Haskin and producer George Powell, a name that we will come back to during the course of this list, put together a masterpiece of film. Changing the setting from 1890s Woking to 1950s California, we find ourselves in the small, tight-knit community of Linda Rosa on a hot summer's evening. It is here that the first of the meteors hit in a local park, sparking much excitement amongst the community, including Pastor Collins, his niece Sylvia Van Buren, and a group of atomic scientists, including Dr. Clayton Forrester, who happened to be camping and fishing in the area at the time. Convenient. From here we see an abridged version of the famous story play out, with a 1950s twist. Whilst fans of the novel will surely mourn the loss of key elements including the red weed or the sinking of the naval ram Thunderchild, we do get to see much of what makes the novel fantastic play out on screen. We see the desperate attempts by a ceaseless military headed up by Major General Mann trying in desperation to stop the Martians' advances.
Guns, tanks, bombs! They're like toys against them!
We know now that we can't beat their machines. Got to beat them.
We see the desperation and horror as our protagonist hides in an abandoned cabin, albeit swapping the curate for the much more lovely Sylvia Van Buren. Spoilers, she fares better than the curate did. We get to see many of the main beats of the novel, albeit with the film's own twist. The tone of this film is, as it should be, dark and at times hopeless. Byron captures a real feeling of foreboding horror and tension throughout the film as the Martians both arrive and then advance. The cast are wonderful. Gene Barry is fantastic in his second starring role as the bright and charismatic Dr. Clayton Forrester. Star of many westerns, Anne Robinson is terrific as Sylvia Van Buren. I'm still confident that the Martians could have been defeated by her screams if they were weaponized. The supporting cast of Les Tremayne and Lewis Martin truly shine here too. Pastor Collins' walk across the battlefield is one of the film's most iconic scenes, and it still really sticks with me to this day. The effects are, for the time, fantastic. Whilst I initially wished for the tripods described by Wells, the production team ultimately considered it impractical and instead went with the now iconic Martian war machines designed by Albert Nozaki with their signature manta ray-like shape. And of course, the Martians themselves. They look great, And thanks to the direction, they avoid being exposed, being seen only sparingly, which results in them having a mysterious and creepy quality to them, something that many modern-day productions could do well to take note of. While I, to this day, live in hope for a period-accurate version of The War of the Worlds, sadly the BBC version did very little for me, I still feel that Byron Haskin's version is my favourite adaptation to date. I'm certain that one day we will cover The War of the Worlds on the Movies Made Us Do It podcast and cover it in much greater detail. We haven't yet, Matt, I checked. So I will leave this here. But suffice to say, if you're looking for a fantastic, atmospheric and classic science fiction film, then you cannot go wrong with Byron Haskin's The War of the Worlds.